The night is beautiful. So are the faces of my God's people. The stars are beautiful. So are the eyes of my God's people. Beautiful also is the sun. Beautiful also are the souls of my God's people. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, Gullah for come by here. Welcome to Boone Hall Plantation, one of the many plantations along what we call the Gullah Geechee corridor that gave birth to the Gullah Geechee people and the Gullah Geechee dialect. West Africa, Senegambia, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Angola, Liberia, Nigeria. They brought us from West Africa to these parts specifically to work the rice plantation. Me no eat no beans, bet out the rice. Me no eat no beans, bet out the rice. Red rice, brown rice, swimping rice, okra and rice, hoppin' John, rice cake. Me no eat no beans, bet out the rice. The West Africans knew how to properly irrigate that ground so that the rice crop could flourish. And we made master rich off of that product called Carolina Gold rice. Me no eat no beans, bet out the rice. Gullah for I don't eat any beans without rice. In the Gullah kitchens of Charleston, South Carolina, and all along the corridor, dinner is not a complete dinner if rice is not being served. Not only did we work the rice plantation, but rice still remains a strong staple in the Gullah kitchens today. Now, when you burn and you scorch your rice, you probably throw it away. Well, we don't throw that away. We eat that. We call it a rice cake. And every New Year's Day, we have a special rice dish we call Hoppin' John. Hoppin' John is field peas and rice cooked together as a casserole with a little ham hock tossed in, and we eat that every New Year's Day for good luck for the upcoming New Year. Now, you can have your baked potato, your mashed potato, your macaroni and cheese, your spaghetti and meatballs. But if rice is not on that dinner table, dinner is not yet ready. Go. When they brought us to this side of the ocean, they dropped us off all along what we call the corridor, the Gullah Geechee corridor. Starting down there in Jacksonville, Florida, coming up to Brunswick and Darien, Georgia, where they put us off on Sapelo Island, St. Simon Island, Jekyll Island, St. Mary's Island. When the ship got to Savannah, they brought us through a port of entry we call the Ogeechee River, which is in Savannah. And when it landed in Beaufort, they put us off at Port Royal. We ended up on Depusky Island, St. Helena Island, and Ladies Island. And when that ship got to this Charleston port, we got dropped off on this side of the river at a place called Sullivan Island, where Fort Moultrie at today. And that's where we had to stay to be quarantined before they put us on the auction block. Well, after emancipation, we got free. Most of your Gullah Geechee people ended up on all the sea islands in Charleston. Johns Island, James Island, Wardmillow Island, Ediso Island, Young Island. You come on this side of the bridge and you travel up 17 north to Georgetown, South Carolina, where Georgetown, too, had a gang of rice plantations. Matter of fact, Michelle Obama's great-great-grandfather worked a rice plantation, and that particular plantation was up for sale last year this time. You travel outside of Georgetown between Pawleys Island and Myrtle Beach. There's a little green sign on the right side of the road pointing to Sandy Island. Sandy, S-A-N-D-Y, a little small island full on the left side of the road, full of Gullah Geechee people. And them fellas don't want no bridge built on their island. And the only way they can get to this side is by boat or raft, their own. But this past April 2011, they got their first official ferry for transporting back and forth. You travel outside of Myrtle Beach, you got Little River, South Carolina, Little River, North Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina. We call that entire stretch from Jacksonville, Florida to Wilmington, North Carolina, the Gullah Geechee corridor, the port of entry for the West Africans brought to these parts of the Americas in slavery. Now, I know you all hear the stories about what happened to us when we first get to this side, how we get beat, how we get flogged, how we get raped, how we get scourged, how they would get we would have our limbs cut off when we would try to escape. They would set up animal traps on the perimeter of the plantation to catch us. Now, all them things happened to us and worse. But we as a people had nothing else we could do but keep our stories in our hearts, for sing our songs, for do our dance, for laugh, for make merry, That's how they survived from that day to this day. Now, keep in mind, there was a few of them plantation owners that did right by their selected slaves, but that scale tipped heavily on the side of wrong because we had so many people that did not do right by the slaves. But eventually, some of the mistreatment had to let up so that we could get the work done that they brought us to this side to do. Boone Hall Plantation at one time was just a piece of land. Major John Boone acquired this land as a wedding gift. When he married Elizabeth Patey, his father-in-law gifted the both of them 468 acres of land, and they decided to work 3 crops. So let me change that. They decided to have us work 3 major crops. And those crops were the cotton, the indigo, and the rice. Now, they had other minor crops like tomatoes and corn, but the cotton, indigo, and rice were 3 major crops. But their cash crop, meaning the 2 crops that brought them in the most amount of money, was the cotton and the indigo. Now, the indigo was that plant that made the blue and purple dye. A lot of slaves got sick behind working that indigo crop because it involved using urine, and the urine had to sit for some days. But those were the major crops, and eventually the Mr. and Masters passed away, and their son Thomas inherited the plantation. Now, Thomas kept the plantation for some years, and then he sold it to some Russian owners. From that point, the plantation changed hands several times. And in the early 1800s, the Hallback family, Mr. Hallback and his 2 sons, they were from Germany. Now, I imagine when they got to the plantation, they must have taken a walk down to the creek. You say creek, I would say creek. They saw the red clay mud and decided to go into the brick-making business. Oh, yes, sir. The slaves, under the Hallback family, was putting out some 4 million bricks a year off of Boone Hall Plantation, providing loads of brick for historic buildings, homes, and churches, many that are still standing in downtown Charleston today. When we talk about original bricks, these 9 slave cabins, all the bricks, original bricks made by the slaves from Boone Hall Plantation. Not original roofing and woodwork, but original bricks. The Cotton Gin House, that's that long building next to the parking lot. That building used to house the ginning equipment that would separate the cotton from the seed. That building also was a restaurant and a gift shop here on the plantation a few years ago. Now it's under renovation. All of that is original brick. And the oldest building on this plantation is the smokehouse. That's that little short cylindrical shaped building right in the corner of the master's front yard. That we call the smokehouse. That's where we kept the master's meat fresh because we had no refrigeration back then. So the process went like this. We would kill the wild game, your deer, your turkey, your quail, your duck, your geese, your hog, your pig, clean the meat, gut the meat out if we had to, and then you would salt that meat down real heavy. Then you hung the salted meat from the ceiling of the roof house, of the smokehouse. Smokehouses didn't have windows. And then they would start a fire in the ground, and that fire would burn for a while. And after the fire burned, they would put it out. Then they'd have them fellas in there fanning the smoke, and that smoke rising up to the ceiling, we call smoking the meat, curing the meat, keeping the meat fresh for when it's time for master to eat. Now, when we first get to the plantation, we used to eat the scrap off of master's table. How so? Well, my great-great-grandmama used to tell us the story. She was a sharecropper, meaning after emancipation, she had no place to go. So she stayed on the plantation and worked for her room and board. Well, she told us of how they would ring a bell. And after ringing of the first bell, we would go to the trough, and we would gather our food from the trough to our hand to our mouth. And we had a tendency to eat fast, because when they rang the second bell, we had to hurry up and move away from the trough so that the next group of slaves could go for it and eat. She used to chide us all the time with, "Look, ya children, why are you trying to choke your food down so fast? Slow down, you eat. Ain't nobody trying to ring no bell." Gullah. Now, when Master starts to let us eat meat, we start eating off the low end of the hog. That's why we people love to eat it so much. And we cook with it in our soup pot. The pig foot, the pig tail, the pig knuckle, the barbecue pig foot, the pickled pig feet. The skin of the hog we call crackling. Crackling is the hog or the pig skin fried in the hog's own grease we call lard. And today we call it a pork skin. Bagging the process and it's softened up a lot. The lining of the hog's stomach, we stuff sausage meat in. Today, we have a special dish we call rice pudding. Rice pudding is nothing sweet. Cooked rice, blended with cooked sausages, spices and peppers added, stuffed into a lining, pressed. You can eat it hot or cold. Really good on a hot plate of grits. And how low can you go? Let's try the hog's intestines. We call chitlins. You say chitterlings, Gullah said chitlins. Now, years ago when I was a little gal, they put them chitlins on that stove. That thing smelled of high heaven. Oh, yes, sir. You couldn't even stay in the house when the time that thing was cooking. But it got a little better. We eat that chitlin by itself or in the good old pot of collard greens. But I want all of you to know that since emancipation, we all are now eating high on the hog. We're eating the pork chop and the ham. Our people, a nation. Now, when you look at these 9 slave cabins, time, there were 3 rows of 9 brick cabins on this area of the plantation, right in the front yard of the master's house. These slaves had free will to move up and down the plantation at will, not having to be under the guise of the whip. Now, those slaves that inhabited the brick cabins, they were specially selected slaves. Just not any slaves were chosen to live in the brick cabins. You had a special skill. You worked for the master in some capacity. Boat maker, net maker, that's the fellow to make the nets to catch the fish, oyster, and crab out the river. The ironman, maker of the gates, the horseshoe men, keeper of the stables, the butler, the maid, the cook, the carriage driver, the seamstress, the keeper of the smokehouse. All them fellas and others, they were the ones chosen to live in the brick house. But now, if you were a regular field slave, you were way out in that field, then you lived in a board house, made of board, and that board house was located way out in the field. Your board house was half the size of this cabin. You had a dirt floor, no window, and no fireplace. Now, that's how it was in the beginning. As the years progressed into slavery, they would add a window or 2 and possibly a fireplace. Sometimes you had anywhere from 2 to 3 families assigned to any one cabin at a time. None of the cabins had back doors for fear of our running away. Now, not only did we work the brick, but Boone Hall Plantation at one time was the largest retailer of pecans. We had planted some 14,000 pecan trees. That's just about how many were standing in 1911, when in that same year, a storm came through, took out 13,000 trees, dropping Boone Hall to the bottom of the totem pole when it came to pecan production, because they were at one time the largest retailer of pecans. Well, in 1989, that happened in 1911, then 89 comes around with Hugo, that eventually takes out some more of those trees that were still standing. There are pecan trees scattered across the plantation. A few of them are in the front of the plantation, some on the back side of the plantation, some producing nuts and some not. If you haven't been on a tram ride, get on that tram ride so that you can see what 760-some acres of land looks like, as opposed to what was at one time max 16,000 to 17,000 acres of land. Now, after the Hallback family, the plantation changed hands several times. And in 1935, one naval officer from Quebec, Canada, Canadian diplomat, came down south, newlywed, visited several plantations, fell in love with Boone Hall. And he purchased Boone Hall Plantation in 1935, 4,800 acres of plantation for $60,000. And one of the first things he did was build a house in Cincinnati. This is the 3rd house built on the plantation. The other 2 homes more typical of what you would see in a southern home, with the long porches and the big swing. A picture of one of the original homes is on the wall in the hospitality house. But he also built a cotton dock. To my right, they're preparing for a wedding today. You might be able to take a stroll down there after the show and take a glance at how they can take a plain old shed and turn it into something beautiful. But that place originally was where we brought all of the goods out of the field, the cotton and everything, and bring it down here for them to package and prepare it to be boarded out to the port city of Charleston. In 1989, Hugo blew the original dock down, and it was rebuilt under our present owners in 1992. Boone Hall Plantation today is owned by a sister and brother team, Mr. Willie H. McCray and his sister Elizabeth. Mr. McCray resides here on the plantation, and his sister lives in California. She comes down several times in the year. Their father purchased this plantation as a gift to their mother. And Mr. McCray was only a year old, and his sister was 11 years old. He was in the vegetable business, actually selling vegetables to the different Caribbean islands, Gullah people. Now, when we first got to the plantation, we brought with us many crafts and trades and skills, and one that's long-standing today is the craft of basket making. What a lot of people don't realize that most of the basket makers, actually the first basket makers in the Gullah family, were the men in our slave communities. The men made the big work baskets that were about the size of these barrels to my right and left, and they used the work baskets to gather the crops out of the field. Well, when the women wanted to weave for the household, they found that the material that the men were using was too rough on their fingers. The men were using split oak and white oak bark. Well, the women went to pulling sweetgrass from the swamp areas. The bulrush is a darker straw like a broom straw from the marsh areas. And out of this window you see the palmetto leaf. They use the palmetto branches to wrap the baskets in. The palmetto tree is our state tree. And in the smaller basket is a longleaf pine needle. We have longleaf pine trees and shortleaf pine trees all over South Carolina. Those are the 4 basic materials. Now, every day there's a basket weaver here on the plantation. Every day. And our baskets here on the plantation are cheaper than any place else. Out here at 17 North, we call that area the Sweetgrass Basket Scenic Highway. You will see basket stands on both sides of the road. Several stands are up in the shopping center here at Town Center. But if, like I said, the cheaper baskets are here. Next best buy is out here at Sweetgrass Basket City Highway. And if you choose to go to historic downtown Charleston, then you choose to pay historic money for the historic basket. Nation, yeah. Now, we came into our Christianity here on the plantation, knowing who God was and worshiping. We brought with us our own tribal forms of worship when we came from Africa. We would sneak away in the wilderness and we would do our tribal chants and our circle dances and our shouts. Well, when we were found out, they forbade us to do it. So now what happens, the Baptists build churches and they require us to attend the little churches, the churches that were built on the plantation. And a lot of them built churches scattered about on the plantation that we call praise houses. Now, many of them were not as large as the praise house, which is the last house in this row. Many of them are not that large, but they were some were in smaller forms. They would be scattered across the plantation. Praise house number 1, praise house number 2, praise house number 3. Well, after emancipation, most of us ended up with a Bible in our household. In the Gullah household, you would always see a family Bible in the front room. What's the front room? What you call your living room, we call the front room. Why the front room? Because at one time, that's all we had. A front room, a back room, and an outhouse. That's what it was. You had a bed on one wall, maybe a bed on another wall, the stove in that one room, several things. We call it the front room. It was the main room. After emancipation, that's how our little shanties looked like. Always located would be the Bible. Turn to the page of the 23rd Psalm of the Ten Commandments. Now, this particular Bible is a Gullah Bible, transposed in 2005, with the King James Version on one side. The Bible today, a lot of the family Bibles are listing our lineage, our grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, birth dates, death dates. A lot of our elders today have no record of a birthday at the Department of Statistics except what has been written in the family Bible. Many of our elders are having to take their Bibles to the Social Security Administration to prove a birth date. My grandfather died back in the 1960s. My grandfather did not know where he was born or when he was born. Did not know, and nothing was recorded in the Bible. So he chose the 4th of July as a birthday because he said that's when everybody celebrated. And he was the day when everybody was having a good time. But usually there was always someone in the community or in the family that remembered a time of the year that he was born, a season, who came after him, who came before him, and that's how his age was pinpointed. Now, this Gullah Bible, just to give you a sample of what the Gullah language sounds like in the Our Father prayer. We, Father, what day in heaven, let everybody honor your name. We pray soon you're going to rule over the world. Whatsoever thing you want in this world, let him be so. Same like he in heaven. Give we the food we need this day and every day. And forgive we for the bad thing we do to other people, same as you forgive them other people for the bad thing they do to we. Amen. Gullah, people, nation. Now, growing up in Charleston, we were always called Gullahs and Geechees. Yep, you were called the Gullahs and Geechees. Had nothing to do about our dress, our food, but strictly our language, our dialect, how we spoke, how we communicated, how we talked. Well, just imagine, Master brings all of us off the auction block. Everybody from a different part of West Africa. Every part of West Africa has a different tribe. Every tribe has its own dialect. So you're on the plantation with all these dialects. You throw them in a pot. You flavor it. It's already flavored with Caribbean Creole influence and the Dutch influence because they were heavily present in West Africa, strongly involved in the slave trade. And then you sprinkle in Master's language. You stir that pot up, and thus we give birth to a means of communicating on the plantation. We call Gullah Geechee. Geechee because of our port of entry through the Ogeechee River in the Georgia area. Originally, the Georgians were called the Geechees, but that term has since traveled all up and down the corridor. And Gullah. There were a large percentage of the Gullah tribe that ended up in the Carolinas, them and the Sierra Leoneans, because those two groups were very, very good at cultivating rice. And rice is that crop that made the Charleston area a very rich, wealthy, and important seaport city. Rice. Carolina gold. Well, that term Gullah, we developed the word Gullah. We shorten words and we lengthen words. So Gullah Geechee today not only embraces my dialect, but it embraces a culture of people who are of West African ancestry, who were brought to these parts of the Americas originally and specifically to work the rice plantation. But we also ended up on anybody's plantation that needed our labor for their cash crop, be it tobacco, be it cattle, be it corn, be it tomatoes, whatever was being grown or raised on the plantation. Gullah Geechee in Florida and Georgia doesn't sound like Gullah Geechee in the Carolinas. Gullah Geechee in Charleston, South Carolina doesn't sound like Gullah Geechee in Beaufort. And Beaufort is 50 miles south from Charleston. Gullah Geechee in Georgetown, South Carolina, 50 miles north, doesn't sound like Gullah Geechee in the Charleston area. The dialect in the Charleston area is a very fast-spoken dialect. It's a rhythmic dialect. It's a dialect where you will hear us change the blends of words. We add letters to words. We take letters away from words. We create sentences to say one thing and mean something totally different. We can engage you in conversation and talk about you at the same time, and you would have no idea. A nation. Just to share with you some of the words that we use and how we tear it up, take the three-letter word ask, A-S-K. When you say you're going to ask a question, your Gullah person says ask them. Just ask them a question and see what he says. You say mouth, Gullah says mouth. You say your TH blends, this, that, there, then. Gullah says this, that, there, then. If I was making reference to this couple, you would say that's him and that's her. Gullah says that's him. That's him right there. That's them. That's them over there. Gullah, people. You say woman, Gullah says woman. You say girl, Gullah says gal. You say man, Gullah says man. You tell someone to come here, Gullah says come here. You say look here, Gullah says look here. You say river, Gullah says river. You say over, Gullah says over. You say vegetables, Gullah says vegetables. You say vinegar, Gullah says vinegar. If you were here on the plantation and you witnessed people coming in and out of the fields, you may have heard this conversation. Man, I walk from can't see to can't see. Man, I worked from can't see to can't see, meaning I got up in the dark to go to work when I couldn't see. And I didn't get to come home until dark when I still couldn't see. Working from can't see to can't see. Some of y'all probably still working like that today. Yeah, Gullah, people, a nation. Just to show you how we can create sentences to say one thing and mean something totally different. What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff. Look, I don't know how Jeff get that job at Bowie. Milk ain't dry off Jeff's mouth yet and did get that fellow the job. That ain't right. Milk ain't dry off your mouth yet, meaning he's too young or too inexperienced to handle the job that he's been given. You might hear somebody say, man, my boss give me all this work to do and he want them done by 5 o'clock. He might say, no, dog got 4 feet, can't walk for one road. Dog got 4 feet, can't walk for one road, meaning I can't do but one thing at a time. Gullah, a nation, people, a nation. Just to share with you, I'm going to use this term. Look here, fellas, I don't know what y'all plan on eating for dinner, but I sure hope y'all grease your mouth for something good today. Grease your mouth. I hope that you eat something good today. Greasing your mouth, like I said, you say mouth, Gullah says mouth. Now, just to share with you how we can talk about you in company, and you have no idea. What's your name? Yeah. Sarah. If I took Sarah home to meet my granny, this is how the conversation would go. Look, yeah, granny, I met a nice gal on the plantation. Yeah, he named Sarah. See if you can find something that takes to Sarah to grease him out on. But granny, watch out for the gal, y'all, because I you hand short a piece shot. Yeah, I just called Sarah a thief. I said he hand short a patient. Her hand is short of patience, meaning she'll pick up anything at the drop of her hat. But what would happen? Not a thing. Everybody be laughing and talking with Sarah, giving her something to eat. But everybody's eyes would be talking to Sarah. Join in with me with this song. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna 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 study war no more. Yeah. How many of you in the audience are not from Charleston? Raise your hand. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me hear you say the word kamia.
Kamia.
Now say benya.
Benya.
Well, we call you guys the kamiyas because you're coming here for the first time. I'm a benya because I've been here for a long time. But now this is how the conversation goes first thing in the morning. Look, young gal, they tell me say there's a whole bunch of kamiyas in Charleston today, and them fellas driving all over the road and don't know where they're going. Watch out for the kamiyas. A nation. When we first get to the plantation, we couldn't depend on them fellas in the big house for take care of we if we fall sick. Oh no, sir, we call the master's house the big house. Well, thank God there was always a man or woman in we family that knew every herb, every spice, every tree, every flower, every root, everything in that river and everything outside the river for take care of we body if we fall sick. And we call them fellows